Greetings and welcome to Captain John's almost live story half hour, brought to you from the peaceful fishing village of Little River, Nova Scotia, Canada. I'm Jonathan White, and my intention here is to take you away from the craziness of what's going on in the world for a little while with stories from my books. So if you've been following me for the last few weeks, you'll know that we finished a trip across Asia last time, and now we're going back to sea for an adventure on a boat delivery from America down to the Caribbean islands. So here we go. I'll put my glasses on and I'm going to read from my first book. Everyone said I should write a book, and the story is called A Night to Remember. After 2 seasons of operating my parasail business on Hilton Head Island, I sold the entire operation. I then sold my Gemini catamaran, on which I'd lived for 2 years and had cruised to Belize and Guatemala. I drove the Bugatti to Charleston, where, having been vetted by Lloyd's of London and proving myself capable on a trial sail to the Caribbean as first mate, I was hired as one of 6 delivery captains for St. Bart's Yachts. This company had won the contract with the Moorings, the largest charter yacht company in the world, to deliver New Beneteau sailboats from the nearby factory in South Carolina down to one of their many charter bases in the West Indies. The boats were trucked to Charleston, put in the water, hurriedly commissioned, and then sailed non-stop about 1,400 miles to Tortola, St. Lucia, or Grenada. As the captain, I was paid for each delivery, but my crew were not. Generally, they had some sailing knowledge, were looking for a chance to gain offshore experience, and would get a free flight back to their home. I never knew who my crew would be until 3 days before we were due to sail. Did they have any offshore experience, or any sailing experience at all? Would they be seasick or scared? Would they do what I told them? Would there be personality clashes? These questions couldn't be answered until we were at sea, and there would be no turning back. Each delivery was different. The boats ranged in size from a small 32-footer to the luxurious 44-foot with 4 cabins. We were not permitted to put up the bimini top, so there was no shade or shelter in the cockpit. The plastic coverings had to be left on all the cushions. We could only use one of the toilets. There was no autopilot, no radar. Just get there as quick as you can and make sure the boat's spotless when turning it over to the base. The weather conditions would vary from flat calms to nasty squalls and once the edge of a hurricane. The crews included a young man in his early 20s looking for a little adventure, the homicidal Irishman, a man-hating lesbian, and a multi-millionaire businessman. Overall, each delivery went fairly smoothly. Usually the crew would mesh well and the passage would be accomplished without major problems. But there were exceptions. Here is the story of one of them. My 3rd delivery in 1994 was on a 44-foot yacht, a comfortable and spacious design with an easy motion and a large cockpit. It was the first time I had been given command of the flagship of the fleet, and I was looking forward to the passage to Tortola, about 1,100 miles. The first mate on this delivery had done 1 ocean passage before, had some sailing knowledge, and could stand his watch without my checking every hour. His name was Rob, and he owned a very successful electrical company in upstate New York. He was short, stocky, in his late 40s, confident and pleasant. The second mate was Bill, in his late 50s, a government employee, the head of the EPA for the state of Delaware. He exuded quiet competence, had done a fair amount of coastal cruising, and was looking forward to his first passage out of sight of land. We spent 3 days gathering provisions, going over the boat, getting to know each other, asking and answering questions. The boat was lowered into the water, the mast was stepped, the systems checked out by the shoreside crew, and then early one morning in October, we cast off the lines, cruised down the Intracoastal Waterway a few miles, and headed out to sea. There is always a sense of exhilaration, tempered with a little anxiety, at the start of any offshore passage, but more so in an untested boat with an unknown crew. We started our watch routine, 3 hours on, then 6 hours off, although it's difficult to go below and sleep when the voyage is just beginning. I checked the boat systems again and the bilges, adjusted the run of the sheets, listened to the engine to make sure it was running smoothly, always watching my 2 crew members to see how they were coping. I was fortunate with Rob and Bill. They were like eager schoolchildren and wanted to be involved with all aspects of getting the boat to its destination safely and quickly. In the first 24 hours, they proved capable of holding a steady course. We had no autopilot, so the boat had to be continually hand-steered, and trimming the sails and doing basic navigation and preparing edible meals. They were each interesting and well-rounded men, and we 3 bonded very quickly into an efficient team. It seemed to me that this will be a very enjoyable, uneventful passage. Our course was to head due east about 400 miles out into the Atlantic, where we looked for the trade winds to send us south to our destination. With a good wind, sometimes motor sailing, we covered the distance in 3 days, found the trade winds, and turned south for the islands. It was late October, still in hurricane season, and the forecast on the 5th day, halfway through the passage, called for a squally night with winds about 25 knots and seas building a little. No hurricanes were in the vicinity. As forecast on my portable SSB radio receiver, the wind started to build in the afternoon and with it the seas. We sped on under reefed main and jib, hissing through the waves at 6 knots, watching some squalls start to develop on the horizon. As evening approached, the temperature dropped a little and the seas got bigger, the wind gusting occasionally to 30 knots. But with our foul weather gear to keep us dry and our confidence in the boat, we felt safe and secure. As dusk fell, the helmsman clipped on his safety harness and prepared for his 3-hour stint at the wheel. This night was different from the other pleasant, star-filled ones we had enjoyed. There were continual squalls now, and little moonlight to spot them with. We changed the watch schedule so that there would always be one of us in the cockpit, along with the helmsman, to relieve him occasionally and look for squalls. They weren't particularly dangerous. Usually the wind would pick up a few knots. For 5 or 10 minutes, the helmsman would bear away. Some warm rain might fall. I watched Rob and Bill from the companionway, and they were handling the situation well. I was very impressed with both of them and how quickly they had adapted to life at sea. About 1 in the morning, having been relieved of my watch, I stripped off my clothes and lay in my bunk trying to catch a couple of hours' sleep. Wedged in with some pillows, the motion wasn't too bad, and I fell asleep quickly, with one eye open. It seemed like only minutes, but I awoke suddenly, knowing something was desperately wrong. The boat was heeled far over, and I had been slammed into the side of the cabin. The wind was howling, and the boat was groaning. There were shouts in the cockpit. They were screaming for me. I ran naked through the salon, where everything had spilled out of the drawers and lockers in the knockdown. I switched on the spreader lights, which illuminated the deck, and clambered up the companionway steps as the boat suddenly lurched upright. The wind noise was deafening. Rain was pelting down. Bill and Rob were wild-eyed in the red glow of the compass light, and bedlam reigned. My eyes were instantly drawn to the compass, so I could get an idea of our heading. I saw something I had never seen in 20 years of sailing and hoped to never see again. The compass was slowly going around and around, but it wasn't the compass. That stays fixed on magnetic north. It was the boat. The reefed mainsail was slamming the boom from one side to another as the boat spun slowly in circles. Bill was struggling with the wheel and kept getting knocked to his knees. Rob was trying to furl in the small area of jib that had been up, but was having little success. I stood there for 2 seconds, taking this all in, immediately buckled my safety harness over my bare chest and leapt into the cockpit. The wind must have been blowing over 70 knots, almost hurricane force, and looking out, all I could see was a wall of spume and rain around us. The wind in the rigging was making an awful noise, so loud that I had to shout from 2 feet away to be heard. "Sails down! Now!" I yelled. I grabbed the furling line and wrapped it around the nearest winch. Rob grounded in with me tailing, sheets cracking, and after 30 seconds the jib was furled. Bill wrestled with the wheel, but the reefed main was making the boat unmanageable. I reached down and turned on the engine, quickly looked to make sure no ropes or lines were trailing in the water, and jammed it into gear. "Try to keep a straight course," I shouted into Bill's ear. "I'll try, but the wind's going in circles." "I've got to get the main down," I yelled loudly again. And then, on that wildly bucking boat, in a maelstrom of wind and waves, the warm rain beating on me, with the boat turning circles, I clipped my safety harness on and climbed out of the cockpit. Without the protection of the Dodger, I was fully exposed to the wind, which tried to blow me off the boat. I clawed my way to the mast in the dark, the spread of lights dimmed by the pounding rain. "Release the main halyard! Release it now!" I yelled. I pulled on the luff of the main, and inch by inch it came down. On my knees on top of the coach roof, I somehow managed to tie some gaskets around the mainsail, securing it to the boom. I crawled back and fell into the cockpit, totally exhausted, totally drenched, still totally naked. And then it all stopped. The wind, the rain, the noise, the spinning. I looked up and saw a star-filled, inky black sky. I looked behind and saw a towering wall of wind and water and rain receding. The seas continued their wild anger. Bill's eyes were huge, and Rob vomited. "What the hell was that?" Bill asked. "I don't know. I've never seen anything like it," I replied. Rob did not look well, so I ordered him to his cabin. He didn't want to go, said it was still his watch, but I insisted. The wind was now only blowing about 20 knots. Bill and I got the cockpit sorted out, cleaned up the mess, hoisted the reef mainsail, unfurled a bit of jib, and set course for Tortola, still 6 or 7 days away. Bill's teeth were chattering. In fact, his whole body was shaking. So I told him to get a couple of hours sleep. I'd get dressed and take over his watch. He went below and I steered through the night, trying to fathom what had happened to us. About 4 a.m, Bill relieved me. Said Rob still wasn't feeling well, but he would still steer by himself for a while. I went below, curled up in my mess of a cabin, and tried to get an hour's sleep. It seemed that no sooner had I closed my eyes than Bill was shaking me awake. John, we've got a very sick man on board. Rob is in agony." That's the end of part 1. What happens to Rob? The rest of us out there. Click on part 2 on YouTube. It says where it is on the Facebook text, and see what happens to Rob. And as this amazing adventure gets more amazing. See you in a bit.